a great pleasure to call on our rabbinic intern, Leah Loeterman, to share words of Torah this morning as we celebrate the Women's Retreat here at Park Avenue Synagogue.
Shabbat Shalom. The journey to women's ordination began in Germany in 1935, decades before any American seminary would open its doors to women. The remarkable story of Regina Jonas, the first woman to be ordained as a rabbi, was almost lost to history after the Holocaust, pieced together with only a few letters and newspaper clippings that were discovered after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Jonas was born in a poor Jewish neighborhood in Berlin in 1902. Her rabbi saw promise in her, and they began a weekly Talmud study together. When Jonas eventually enrolled in seminary, she was the only woman on the rabbinic track. In her final thesis, titled "May a Woman Hold Rabbinic Office," Jonas illustrated the halachic or legal basis for the ordination of women within Jewish text and tradition. Her thesis was revolutionary because she did not align with the Reform movement, which was not as concerned with Jewish law, nor did she align with orthodoxy, which did not regard egalitarianism as compatible with Jewish law. With her modern approach to Jewish law and living, Jonas was a conservative Jew without even knowing it. And in 1935, she was ordained in Berlin, laying the foundations for all women who would follow. But within a few years, Jonas was deported to Theresienstadt. Under the most brutal conditions imaginable, she made pastoral visits, led services, and delivered sermons to the Jews suffering miserably in the camp, desperately in need of spiritual support. According to documents discovered after the Holocaust, Jonas fiercely believed that God had called her to serve, endowing her with a specific skill set, irrespective of gender. I imagine that Jonas's compassion and conviction must have been a source of comfort and strength for her and her community through one of the most horrific events of human history. She was deported one final time to Auschwitz, where she was murdered. Regina Jonas was our pioneer, and on this Women's Network Shabbat, we honor and remember not only her legacy, but the continuation of the sacred work that she began. If her story was nearly lost forever, we can only wonder if there are other women whose tales we have yet to discover. Certainly, Jonas was not the first learned Jewish woman. The Talmud records stories of Bruriah, who was more learned than the wisest rabbis and students, and would often rebuke them for not knowing various laws and teachings. But Bruriah was Rabbi Meir's wife and Rabbi Hanina ben Teradion's daughter, never possessing the title rabbi herself. More recently, Henrietta Zold, the Zionist leader and founder of Hadassah, begged Solomon Schechter for permission to study in advanced courses at the Jewish Theological Seminary. Schechter, who was president of JTS at the time, allowed her to take classes on the condition that she would never seek ordination. The horrible tragedy of the Shoah cut Regina Jonas's time far too short, but her legacy continues with every woman who is ordained and with every community that supports the ordination of women. This year, as we know, we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the ordination of women in the conservative movement. In 1983, JTS made the landmark decision to admit women to the rabbinical school on the grounds that the women entering take on all the mitzvot. When Amy Eilberg graduated from JTS, she was the first woman to be ordained as a conservative rabbi. About a decade earlier, the Reform movement in America ordained Sally Priesand, and shortly thereafter, the Reconstructionist movement followed suit. Within the past few years, Orthodox women have been ordained as clergy as well, though not with the title rabbi. Rabbi Avi Weiss ordained Sarah Hurwitz only 5 years ago, and together they founded Yeshivat Maharat, the only Orthodox yeshiva in the world that ordains women as clergy. 30 years ago, when JTS began admitting women to the rabbinical school, 19 women enrolled. To put that number in perspective, there are a total of 16 people in my class at JTS, 9 of whom are women. 19 women in one class is an exceptional case and truly reflects the need that existed in the movement at the time. As the number of women in the conservative rabbinate has grown, the JTS Rabbinical School curriculum has evolved to reflect this change. For example, there's now a strong emphasis on stereotypically feminine rabbinic skills, such as teaching and counseling, just as there has always been great value placed on stereotypically masculine rabbinic skills, such as preaching and learning Talmud. A concerted effort is being made to produce rabbis who are well-rounded in all aspects of rabbinic life. This is best exemplified by our own clergy. Both the male and female clergy sitting on this bima all teach and speak and counsel, and these responsibilities are not only open to every one of them, but are demanded of every one of them. This is one of the many reasons I'm so grateful to be pursuing this rewarding work, to be learning and serving in this community with these rabbis and cantors as my mentors. Due to women's increasing participation in all aspects of Jewish ritual life, both in and beyond the rabbinate, we're now more conscious than ever of the language we use in prayer. In this synagogue, and in so many others, the imahot, the matriarchs, are included in the first paragraph of the Amidah, which originally only mentioned the patriarchs. Our translations of the liturgy and the Bible today are also far more sensitive to gender, careful to avoid assigning exclusively masculine language to God. These changes may sound subtle, but they have had a significant impact both on the rabbinate and the Jewish community at large by evolving the way we understand gender and leadership in Jewish life. But as far as we've come, as many substantive changes as we have made, there is more work to be done. In a comprehensive study by the Rabbinical Assembly in 2004, titled Gender Variation in the Careers of Conservative Rabbis, Professors Stephen Cohen and Judith Shore found that there is a significant gap in the compensation of male and female rabbis, as there is in most professions, and that there are many more men than women in pulpit positions. Of these, the smaller pulpits are usually led by women, while the larger pulpits are usually led by men. Like in most industries, there are more men than women at the top. In Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg offers a way to work toward increased equality. The men in these senior positions need to mentor more women. Once again, Rabbi Cosgrove is ahead of the curve. The study also found that 27% of women in congregational settings heard several or many hurtful remarks related to their age, and a majority reported likewise for remarks about their gender. The findings are now 10 years old, so the numbers may not be the same today, but the problem persists. I'll never forget leading minyan in a synagogue early on in rabbinical school, where there was a congregant who would occasionally make comments about my age, nothing hurtful, I never thought much of it. Then one day he came up to me and said, "You should probably go into education. Pulpit work is going to be too brutal for you. You won't be able to handle it." I looked him directly in the eye and said, "I'm pretty tough." I have no idea what the experience of being male clergy is like, but I suspect that my male colleagues rarely, if ever, have needed to say out loud, "I'm pretty tough." Most of the remarks made to female clergy about age, clothing, and gender are likely just passing comments not intended to be demeaning at all, but they're a reminder to each of us in any space to be mindful of the language we use. As I anticipate my own ordination from JTS in the coming months, I think about how I got to this point and the people who brought me here. My personal journey to the rabbinate began, ironically enough, in my secular, all-girls high school. Every day, friends would ask why I was not eating the pepperoni pizza, why there were all of a sudden several foods I was avoiding during Passover. Growing up in a Jewish elementary school, I took my familiarity with Jewish jargon for granted. But once I had to articulate what kashrut is and why I keep kosher, once I had to explain what Shabbat is and why it is important to me and my family, I was forced to think very critically about my practices. This challenged me to look deeper into our tradition and deeper into myself to discover the layers of beauty and details behind my practice, thousands of years old. I internalized every ritual, every prayer, every story so differently after that. Just as Regina Jonas describes of her own experience, I too felt that there was something within compelling me to do this work, a sense that I had found a way to thoughtfully and meaningfully contribute. Love of Torah, dedication to the Jewish people, commitment to the state of Israel, devotion to God, constant curiosity. These things are not bound by gender. You may have noticed that this morning's Torah reading names several women. However, only one of them actually speaks. She is Rachel's midwife, and she is unnamed. Rachel is Jacob's wife, and throughout her story, she always has trouble conceiving. After the birth of her first son, Joseph, Rachel prays to God for another son, and now she gives birth to her second son, and her labor is painful and difficult. Rachel is dying, just as the son she prayed for is born. As Rachel takes her final breaths, her midwife comforts her. Al tir'i, ki gam ze lach ben. Have no fear, for it is another son for you. In this moment, Rachel's midwife is her rabbi, offering Rachel a rabbinic voice, comforting Rachel in her pain, with her in her vulnerability. This is the only voice Rachel needs in this moment, a voice that only this woman can give her. From the midwife at Rachel's deathbed, to Regina Jonas in the concentration camps, to Sally Presand at HUC and Amy Eilberg at JTS and the rabbis to come, these rabbinic voices have been deep within women for centuries. And in this day and age, we are fortunate to celebrate and support them. So it seems only fitting to conclude with the voice of Regina Jonas, who writes the following in a sermon delivered in Theresienstadt. Our Jewish people was planted by God into history as a blessed nation, to offer blessings, loving kindness, and loyalty, regardless of place and situation. Humility before God, selfless love for his creatures, sustain the world. Woman and man alike have taken this upon themselves in Jewish loyalty. Our work in Theresienstadt, serious and full of trials as it is, also serves this end, to be God's servants, and as such to move from earthly spheres to eternal ones. May all our work be a blessing for Israel's future and the future of humanity. If Regina Jonas in her time and place in history was able to channel this kind of compassion and love, hoping that her life and legacy will be a blessing for future generations, then how much more so are we, sitting comfortably in this beautiful sanctuary, obligated to continue the holy work that she began. May our own work be a blessing for Israel and for all of humanity. Shabbat Shalom.